the world. Welcome to the Dapper Dollars Leadership Insight series. If this is your first time watching a Leadership Insight series live stream, welcome. We're glad you found time to join us here. The series is all about empowering you with tips and strategies straight from industry leaders. I'm talking about exceptional folks. So we want to create an inclusive space where meaningful conversations actually happen. And today we gather to explore a critical aspect of leadership that's all about increasingly being vital and conscious about our fast-paced and ever-changing world. So it's called leading with purpose and authenticity. So as someone who has had the privilege to have lived, worked, and studied across 22 cities, across 3 continents, quite a traveler I am, I witnessed firsthand how diverse perspectives and experiences can actually enrich leadership. I actually see how authentic leadership can transform teams and communities by creating environments where everyone feels not only valued, they feel empowered to contribute their best. So I'll pass it over to my co-host Anirban, who has a personal story to share on this topic.
Thanks, George. My name is Anirban Bomik, and as George mentioned, I'm also one of the founders of Dapper Dollars. We believe today's topic is an important subject because being your authentic self and finding your voice is a part of many of us that struggle with as we grow up. As you may or may not know, I was born in India, but primarily grew up in the States. This gave me a unique experience of navigating 2 cultures simultaneously. At home, I was raised by 2 hardworking parents who instilled in me traditional values. In our culture, hierarchy is highly respected, and speaking up, especially to elders, is generally reserved for when we are addressed. And on the other hand, my experience at school was quite different. I was surrounded by a diverse group of peers, raised largely with American values that encouraged open expression, sometimes even actively supported by parents and teachers. As this parallel dichotomy has been a constant theme in my life, I notice it's present even at work. I have my work personality that aligns with my traditional upbringing, and then I have my social or outside of work personality that is more free spirited and outspoken. And so, for those who are keeping up with the Apple TV series Severance, you may know that, or could say that I have my own innie and my outie. So, that's why I'm excited to dive deep into this topic, the power of authenticity, and explore how leaders can embrace their true selves while still leading their teams with purpose and integrity. And with that, I have the pleasure to introduce our special guest. So, Dapper Dollars is honored to welcome Brandi Harvey. She's the host of the podcast Vault Empowers Talks for an exclusive LinkedIn live conversation and on authentic leadership. A powerhouse leader, author, and changemaker, Brandi has dedicated her career to inspiring others to break through fear, live with intention, and lead with confidence. Beyond being the daughter of Steve Harvey, Brandi has blazed her own trail as the sought-after speaker, executive producer, and wellness advocate. From leading the Steve and Marjorie Harvey Foundation to empowering women through her company Beyond Her, she champions the power of self-discovery, purpose-driven leadership, and holistic well-being. Her impact has been widely recognized, including receiving a Lifetime Achievement Award under the President Biden administration. Today, she'll share her insights on authentic leadership, overcoming challenges, and embracing authenticity in alignment with organizational values. Welcome, Brandi.
Hey, what's up? Thank you for having me. Yeah,
Awesome.
this is my first LinkedIn live.
It's a first for everything, and I think we're actually thrilled and honored to have you here because you're such a phenomenal speaker. So we feel your perspective is needed to be shown to the entire world. So I appreciate that. I would go ahead and kick off. So Brandi, your I'll say your journey has come from like leading like a very huge foundation to empower women through Beyond Her. You also host like your podcast. Can you kind of share your experience as to how your what you've done in your life? How has that shaped your understanding of authentic leadership, and how that's actually going ahead to impact your decisions as well?
Oh my God, I feel like I am the cat with 9 lives. I have lived many lives. Recently, my little cousin was talking to me and she was like, "Oh my God, Brandy, like you've done a million things." I've run nonprofit all through college and after school programs, which then led me to be a high school teacher in Los Angeles, which led me to be a group fitness instructor, a personal trainer, have a meal delivery business where I did meal prep for people, for competitors, to then being a nonprofit executive, to then moving into the space now of being an author, a speaker, a teacher on wellness, and an advocate for wellness. I think the biggest thing about my authenticity is that I have never been afraid to reinvent myself. I have never been afraid to try something new. And I think that's when we live, in the spirit of that authenticity, when we're true to ourselves, the path becomes clear, right, along the way. Now this has not come without hiccups. This has not come with some downslope moments, a lot of valleys, mixed in with those great hills. But I think the biggest thing for me is just I've just never been afraid to step out and try something new, whether it's traveling alone, going to, have dinner with strangers. My ability to have dinner with strangers, even now, I still do this thing where I sign up on this app. It's called Time Left, and you do dinner with strangers. I do that, right? Because then it helps me when I go sit down with world leaders like Adaji, and I'm in India and I'm meditating with 80,000 people. And, I get to have these experiences, that put me in spaces that are not always from my wheelhouse or even in my comfort zone, right? Me being unafraid to challenge myself to experience new things have really lend themselves to me being the authentic leader that I am now.
Brilliant. I appreciate that. Also, me for a bit, just looking to digest everything. I appreciate you giving that context on what really defining authentically leadership looks like from your perspective. That was brilliant. I do also want to have this follow up, regards to what you just said. So you just mentioned again how you were able to weave in your life lessons. So basically, as you're going through your failures, your successes, you wove that in and got an ultimate definition to who you are. But someone who's actually been recognized, I want to get your perspective. And so now in our world today, how do you believe a professional, a leader can actually cultivate authenticity within their role, but still maintain a professional presence as well?
Oh my God. For all the moments that I haven't been professional. for, for all the moments that I was probably a HR nightmare. Okay. Just know that I've had those moments along the way. I think what has really been, self-awareness for me, and the work that I've done on myself, the personal development. I tell people all the time that you are developed in the dark. And just like how we used to not have these handy dandy phones, that we snapped all the pictures and it was an instant real time live photo, right? You had to take the photo, you had to let the film go be developed. Our group, we went to CVS and Walgreens and dropped it off, and a week or two later we came back and we was like, damn, that was the picture I got. Like, that's the one out of all the pictures, you got one, good one in that stack, right? But I tell people life is so much of me being developed in the dark. It's the moments where people don't see. It's the 7 years of weekly therapy that nobody saw, right? It's the countless books. I mean, even, I sat down last night when I was trying to figure out what I was going to say to my audience this morning. Um, I've read 30 books this last year, right? I did 30 books this last year. And like for some people, like that might be a small amount of books. For some people, that's a large amount of books. But I say that because the development for me happens on the moments, not here, not when I'm on stage in the morning. It's not happening when you see the finished product of the book. And it's not happening when you see how the podcast comes out, the talk show comes out every Thursday at 10 a.m. on YouTube, right? It's the moments that people don't see that develop me in the dark. And so while I've had these, you know, great professional highs, I think what has really lended to my success has been the moments where I've had to take a step back and become extremely self aware of who I am, the type of person, the type of woman that I want to be when I walk in spaces, because I wasn't always this way. I was that young 20-year-old, early 30 hothead, who was knucking and bucking and ready to fight, who always needed to be right, right? I was that person in professional spaces who needed to be the loud one so you understood that I know what I'm talking about, right? But when I had to be developed in the dark, well, I had to take a step back and then I had to get quiet. And what has really helped me become a much better leader is the moments that I spend in the solitude, the moments that I spend in the quietness, right? The meditation, the moments where there's nothing on, there is no phone, there is no tablet, there is no music, there is no nothing. It's just me and the Most High, right? And I get to then in those moments get the downloads, right? I tell people all the time that my Wi-Fi be on, right? And when I say my Wi-Fi be on, I'm really talking about my spiritual Wi-Fi, so that when I'm, because of those moments of solitude, right? Because of that deep listening that I allow myself to have, because of the meditation, because of the therapy, because of the silent reading and studying to become more self-aware, I'm able to walk in spaces as a much more grounded leader. I'm able to walk in spaces with a level head. I'm able to speak in a way that's clear and concise. I can get my message across where I don't have to be loud. I don't have to be brash. I don't have to belittle. I don't have to tear others down. I can walk in a space confidently knowing that there is power just in my presence. And so, because I understand that there's power in my presence and I control the temperature in the room, right? I control how my team is going to operate. I control that. So, because I understand that and I know the impact of that, I allow myself, when I'm being developed in the dark, when there is nobody around, I'm allowing myself the moment to be quiet so I can get the download, so I can hear, so I can be clear, so I can be connected to source, so that when I walk into these spaces, I'm a much better, purposeful leader, and I can hear my team clearly and I can see things before they happen. And I have a different vantage point because I'm able to operate up here and I can look and have that bird's eye view. I'm not going in nitpicking at little things. I'm here to make sure that the vision that I have and the purpose that I know I've been sent here to accomplish, that I can get that and take that to the next level. But it requires me to do it requires me to be developed in the dark, when no one is around. That's when the real magic is happening.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that, because I think, like you said, I think you mentioned this before. We live in that microwave generation where things are instant, quick. You need to have that dark space, that dark room to develop yourself, to develop your picture, to have that clear vision
Yeah.
to where you want, and then you can get what you want. And then so talking about taking a step back and really to get where you are now. I know you talked about your self development, and also I want to bring up your company Beyond Her. You're empowering powerful women
Yeah.
of color women, right? So, and for that, you need to have an entire team to lead this organization, to lead your company. So, what would you say? What are some strategies that right now you are using to that you've developed yourself before and now you're able to lead yourself authentically, to lead your organization? And then on top of that, what are some other strategies that you can share with others who are maybe not have started their own thing, but they've kind of been popped into something else, but they've now trying to find their own voice to lead an entire team that may have different, just ideas, or their about their leadership that it might not quite jive with them the same way.
Oh, so I have two very, like, I'm such a much better leader now, right? When I was in my 20s and early 30s, I was leading my family's foundation. I was at the helm in 2009 of creating and starting the Steve Harvey mentoring program, which we grew exponentially to have mentoring programs all across the country, to do mentoring programs in cities like New York, Chicago, Detroit, New Orleans, Los Angeles, Atlanta. And that that was not an easy feat, right? Because you're dealing with 100 to 200 plus boys in every single city, as well as that means 100 to 200 plus parents, and all the sponsors, the donors, all the things that come along with it. And in my early 20s, pre-therapy, right? Before I went to therapy, before I got some help, before I got some help, listen, I thought that I had to be like the men I saw in leadership. And because I thought I had to be like them, I mimicked their behavior. I mimicked how they showed up in meetings. I mimicked that type of bravado. And as a woman, and you are mimicking a man, now that becomes, now you are like working this whole program that is like totally like counterintuitive. Like we are not hustling forward, we are definitely hustling backwards. And, it took me a long time to really learn who I was, like learn myself, not trying to take on someone else's cloak, someone else's armor, and put that on and think that I can fight the battle. Right. And I think oftentimes when we're starting out, whether we're in business, we're starting a brand, we're starting out at a company, we're starting in maybe an entry level, whatever, we look at the people at the top and we say, well, I got to do that in order to become that. And so much of my life was about putting on someone else's armor. We can look at that from a biblical standpoint, right? We can look at the story of David and Goliath, right? The story of David and Goliath, what happens? Well, David goes to fight the battle, and guess what? Saul, the king, says, well, here's some armor, because obviously you're too small, you're too frail, you don't really have what it takes. I don't really think you got the sauce, right, to perform at this level. And so he says, you can put on my armor. And David's like, but I haven't been preparing for the battle with that armor. I've only been preparing when I've been in the field, when I've been the shepherd boy. I've only been preparing with a slingshot and 5 smooth stones. I've only had that. And so I only know how to use that weaponry. And I think so often we get into spaces and we try to put on other people's armor to fight a battle that is solely ours. And so we're looking to put on someone else's gift, someone else's ingenuity, someone else's level of creativity, and we think, well, maybe that'll work for me. And we find out every single time that it doesn't work. It only works when we show up as who God has called us, who source has called us, who the creator has called us to be in this season of our lives for such a time as this. And so it took me until I was 33, 34, 35 years old to find my own voice, to find my own way. Now, add on top of me trying to put on someone else's armor and then having a father who is a global megastar, who is a super house, who is a powerhouse. Add on to those shoes that stand in front of you. Imagine the type of pressure that I must have felt. Imagine those type of moments where I don't feel good enough, I don't feel adequate, I don't feel like I'm enough all by myself, because look at that, you're not that. Are you ever going to be that? And so it took me a really long time. So now at this big age, as a woman over 40 years old, at 42 years old, I'm so secure in who I am, and I'm so secure in my gifting. And so I think that for the audience who's listening, if I could tell you anything, you got to learn how to wield your own weapon, just like David had to do, right? You got to learn how to play with the hand that you've been given. I know somebody else's hand looks better. And I know somebody else's, plight looks like it's got a better situation. But when we learn how to wield our weapon properly, when we learn how to play with the hand that we've been dealt, life opens up in such an amazing way. And so, had I not learned those things along the way of like, wait a minute, this does not fit. It's like, Goldilocks and the Three Bears. It's like, well, this is too hot and this is too cold and this is not, all the things. But somehow the breadcrumbs find their way and we end up finding our way back to ourselves. And so I was able to find my way back, but not with a lot of bumps, along the way. I learned how to use the gift of my femininity. I learned how to use the gift of my charisma. I learned how to use the gift of gab. I learned how to use all these things that I'm really great at making, of, really disarming people. I really am really great at disarming people that, wait a minute, they feel so comfortable where I've never said this to anybody else, right? So because I've honed that skill, now when people come and sit across from me at Vault and Powers Talks every single week, and now every single Thursday when those episodes drop at 10 a.m., here's the thing that people say to me all the time: I've never said this to anybody else. Man, I could talk to you all day. I didn't even know I was going to say that. Brandy, you the first person to get this out of me. Well, it's had I not had the bumps of trying to figure out how to play with somebody else's hand and how to try to let me see how your weapon and your armor fits me. No, I learned how to use mine. And when I learned how to use mine, well, life opened up. And then I became the person who I've always really set out to be. That's the authentic version of me. It's the best version of me. And I only strive to get better. But I had to learn how to wield my own weapon, learn how to play with my own winning hand, learn how to take everything that God has already placed inside of me to become the absolute best version that He has called me to be for this season.
You're speaking so much wisdom here, and I'm highly impressed of like how much experience you've had. That talk about going back to the full circle about dark room, being able to develop yourself, and then I don't know, like, or what are some strategies that you would give others to kind of have that? Because I know it takes time to build, and the type of
Yeah.
wisdom that you're sharing here. What have you done? It sounds like going back to as well. You mentioned about you've never been fearful of taking on new challenges. And is it that, or is it the mountaintop meditation that you've done? And is that the type of enlightenment you've gotten? So yeah, what are some strategies that people can do so they can have this type of wisdom like you have?
Oh, I'm gonna give you these three C's that I used. I did a TED talk this year, and it's the art of deep listening and how we can transform our relationships by listening deeply to one another. And the first thing I said was you got to get quiet, right? You have to get quiet. I think the problem is because we are so inundated with so many different pieces of technology and so many different moments where our minds are always racing, and this little phone, baby, it just lets us, we can just go down a scroll hole, all the things, right? But in order for us to really tap into this deeper part of who we are, we got to get quiet, right? We got to get quiet. We have to set moments for throughout our day that even if it's 20 minutes, right? Everybody has 20 minutes. Even if it's 20 minutes in the morning, if it's 20 minutes in the middle of the day. I've done this where I have put on, I've had 5 minutes running into another Zoom call, right? I've had 5 minutes. Oh my God, I got 5 minutes. That was so much. It was so crazy. Oh my God, what the hell was that? Help me, God, right? 5 minute meditation. I will put a 5 minute meditation on. I will do 5 minutes of just breathing and silence. And guess what? I can shift my mind instantly. And so that part of getting quiet, it affords us this opportunity. So when we show up, we do what? We get curious. That means we get to have deeper conversations with people. We get to ask better questions because we're curious about who they are in their journey. What I've realized in doing, in especially now over the 2 years that we have launched Bought and Powers Talks, the gift that I have is this curiosity, is knowing that no matter who you are, what you've done, what you've accomplished, there's a story there. There's a deeper story that has allowed you to become this version of you. There's a moment where you have had some adversity. There's some moments where you thought, do I turn back now or do I just keep going? Do I quit? Do I pivot? What do I do? And that curiosity, it lends to so much. But here's the thing, it's not just about me being curious when they come and sit in the chair. It's about the curiosity long before they get there. It's about having dinner with strangers. It's about putting myself in uncomfortable situations. It's about going to silent meditation retreats in Boone, North Carolina, in the mountains to go get quiet. But then those same mountaintop experience afford me opportunities to go meditate in India with 80,000 people, right? At one time. It's the curiosity that keeps me expanding my life. And then the last one is we get connected. I tell this story because over the last 2 years, I've been listening really deeply to my grandmother. And I tell this because I was one of those people who did not have a good relationship with my grandmother. And I was like, why didn't I get the grandmother who baked cookies and was nice? Like, where was that lady? You know what I'm saying? Like, why didn't I have a lady who was nice and sweet and like from the movies, right? Like, my grandmother is like a firecracker. She is always talking, cash. I don't want to cuss on this platform, right? But she's always like, Graham, really? Like, do you have anything nice to say? Like, it's a saying that says if you don't have nothing nice to say, don't say nothing at all. So, but there was a moment when I was like, I don't like talking to my grandmother. And but then I realized that I don't have much longer with my grandmother. She's 87 years old. So 2 years ago, I started practicing deep listening with my grandmother. And I started listening to her, like where I would be cooking dinner and I would call my grandmother and I would just put my phone on mute. I would be like asking her questions. I'd be like, so what about that? What about this? And tell me about that time when how'd you meet granddaddy and how'd you do this? And what was it like when, you were 30 and what were you doing? I started asking her all these questions and I just started listening. And as I started listening, I started hearing the woman that my grandmother was and the woman that my grandmother is. And I started listening to her in such a way that we would be laughing on the phone and 2 hours would go by. And I would be laughing. I'm like, damn, my grandmother is really lit. Like, I would be like, girl, you was like city girls before city girls. Like, you was like, city girls up. Like, you were really up here, like, living your best life. And I started to understand some of the choices that she made. And it took it made our relationship just shift, right? And because I would be like telling my sister and I would be telling my little cousin about my conversations with my grandmother, they'd be like, wait, Graham did what? Wait, Graham, what? Like, she did what? And so now they're even more intrigued. So guess what? Because of me listening deeply with my grandmother and fostering that safe space and that relationship to be connected, since then, my grandmother's name is Doris. So now we have a group chat, a FaceTime group chat with my grandmother called Doris and the Dolls. And so every week, me, my sister, I have a twin sister named Carly, and I have a little cousin named Alexis, and she's 24 years old. She's the baby granddaughter, right? And all three of her granddaughters sit on FaceTime with her for hours at a time every single week just to catch up. And it has changed the nature of our relationship. And so I say this opportunity for us to get quiet. It's not the three C's, it's really two C's, but number one, you get quiet. And that affords me the opportunity to connect with source and be, more centered and have a more clear level head. It gives me clarity. It gives me understanding. It gives me to be able to feel and understand, like, my Wi-Fi is really on, my antennas get to go up because I get quiet. But then I get curious and I tap into places and spaces with people that they may have never even known. Like, damn, I didn't even know that was even a thing for me, Brandi. But then I get connected, and because of that connection, it fosters this opportunity for connection to happen, not just with me, but with other people, right? And so now the Doris and the Dolls calls is now like a thing. And now we're going to Vegas. And my grandmother is coming to Vegas with us in June. You know what I'm saying? Like, all of that. And 87-year-old grandmother, she'll be 88 in May, and we're taking her to Vegas.
Well, I mean that's so I think that goes back to okay, let me first start off with this. You mentioned quiet, but to make it kind of complete the three C's. So like the app Calm. So that's what you're doing to get quiet,
Yeah.
get calm, kind of have a reset from your busy life or the previous meeting or whatever it was. So you get calm, you get quiet, and then you start getting curious. So that's when you get to collect your thoughts, and then you start thinking about, you're kind of sparking your imagination, you're sparking
Yeah.
your questions you want to ask for the next person, and then finally getting connected and being present, and then being able to connect with one another. And like your example you mentioned about you with your grandma, you realize like how much relatable this person is, right? The
Yeah.
apple does not fall too far from the tree. And then you realize that if you apply this three C's across other people, you realize how many similarities other people are. And then you realize that you can find your authentic voice that way because a lot of people you can relate to. And so I think going back to
Absolutely.
that, that's awesome that you shared those three C's. I kind of connected that where I can apply that and anybody can apply that with
Yeah.
others and just get connected. And so you realize that you being your authentic self can actually be helpful and relate to others as well. So I
Yeah.
appreciate that. Thank you.
You are so welcome. It was one of those things that I did not see coming, right? And then when I sat down and I started thinking about what I wanted to do for the TED Talk this past year, it
Mm,
was like my grandmother was like that glaring thing. It was like, you've done this. Like, look at
Hmm.
what, because of that, because of you taking those steps, like it has really created a space for. So if we don't call her, I just want y'all to know, like, if we do not call her, like, we have not had a dog. Where's our call? We have not done our call,
Yeah.
and so now it's like everybody looks forward to it. So we got to be on a group chat, like, hey, everybody free tonight? We're calling
That's
Graham at
awesome.
8 o'clock.
I love that. I love that. Brandy, I just want to say one thing I really did do enjoy. I think I first heard you speak at a corporate event last year, and I like how you just come with a very, very candid perspective. So thank you for being an advocate for therapy, talking about the
Yeah.
gravitropic mindset. A lot of people do not know, hey, like you see all the shine, there was some dirt behind that. So I really do appreciate that. So when we sort of announced this event, hi, we're having you to come live. So we did get a few emails from very interesting folks, and one thing they wanted to find out was around navigating pressures to conform. So basically, code switching. So as someone who's championed like change in multiple fields, like obviously you've definitely faced pressures to present to be what you're not supposed to be or what you're not comfortable with. Can you share a moment when you face such pressures, and how did that help you in terms of your resilience? Like you say, like, hey, I'm just going to stay true to who I am 100%.
Oh, I think especially as a black woman, I've had so many moments along the way where you feel this duality. You feel like you have to code switch. I haven't always been, most of the environments that I've been in, I will say, and I'm so grateful, have been very colorful environments, right? Where I'm not the only one. I've had very few moments like that, even as a student at Ohio State and stuff like that. I had very few moments where I was just, one. Um, but there was a moment where I did this project in 2014. It was called the Millennial Trains Project. And the Millennial Trains Project was this opportunity for young millennials to kind of be like how our forefathers was on this new frontier of where life is changing in America. And we went on this 10-day train journey around the country. And so you had to crowdfund $5,000 to be on this train, and you had to be driving a project for the 10 days that you were on the train. And so what piqued my interest was the fact that the train went from Portland, Oregon to Seattle, Washington to Whitefish, Montana to Minneapolis, St. Paul to Milwaukee, Chicago, and ended in New York, all in 10 days on a train, on like a vintage style dome train. And so I was so intrigued by this opportunity. And the project that I wanted to do was called Spiritual, Not Religious. Are millennials moving away from their parents' religion and forming their own spiritual practices? Now, this is over 10 years ago. This is 2014. And I remember, when I was setting up the project and setting up different interviews and things that I was doing, the research that I was doing in prep for this, the thing that they told me when they reached out to me and said, you've made it on the train, you've been accepted, was like, nobody's ever talked about religion on these projects. Like, nobody's ever talked about spirituality. Like, that was so intriguing. But of course, you go into this space, and there were people from all over the world who did this. But when I would go into, I remember when I went to Portland, when I went to Seattle, and went to Whitefish, Montana, you weren't seeing too many, you know what I'm saying? Okay, it was given very much, you were not here, okay? And so I remember at that time, and this is 11 years ago, so I was early 30s, and I was so uncomfortable. I remember like I was in Whitefish, Montana, and I set up this interview with a psychic medium in Whitefish, Montana. Now I get in the car. This white lady comes to this coffee shop to pick me up. Now y'all know I said, Brandi, if this is not a way for you to end up on an episode of Missing Persons, Brandi, like I'm sitting up here like, hey, let's take a picture before we leave, because I'm trying to get the people who I'm on the train with take a picture of her license plate just in case I come up missing, right? But I'm sharing that story because as much as I knew that I was driven for a very deeper and a much more meaningful purpose during that project, there were so many moments in that 10 days that I was like, what the heck am I doing? Why am I doing it? And they, they're like, oh, you're a black woman coming to talk to all these different spiritual practices, everything from Buddhist practices to Catholicism, this huge grotto in Portland, to the largest Scientology center in the Midwest over in St. Paul, to all these different practices that I was going to meet all these different, to a psychic medium in Whitefish, Montana, right? And I just remember being so uncomfortable, right? But I knew that there was so much. I'm going to say this again because I said this in the beginning, that there is power in our presence. And I think so often we forget that there is power in us showing up. There is power in us being in the room. There is power in us just being a visual representation that somebody is thinking different, someone is believing different, somebody has a different point of view from me. There is something different. And it forced me so much over those 10 days to not code switch. And it was hard for me not to, because sometimes we know how to turn on our voice, right? We turn on a different voice, right? We turn on the voice like, yeah, totally. I am like so excited about that. Yeah, major, major, right? It's certain stuff I'm just like, I don't even say that shit. You know what I'm saying? But so it's so many moments along the way, but I knew in that moment I was gonna be stretched. But when I went to Whitefish, Montana, and I sat down with this woman, psychic medium out of, I mean, literally a white woman, psychic medium in Whitefish. And I remember sitting there and she said to me, she said, this is something I've never talked about with a black woman before. She was like, I mean, I wouldn't even, I don't really find too many black women interested in things like this. And that's when I knew that I was supposed to be there. I was supposed to be that encounter for her, but she was supposed to be that encounter for me. And I think sometimes we run from those moments because we don't want to have to code switch. But in those moments, it's like when we show up as who we know we are, like life just opens up. It's like most recently I had Daji Kamlesh D Patel. He's affectionately known as Daji in the heartfulness movement. And it's the heartfulness meditation practice. He recently did my show. Now, all these Indians walk into that house, baby. I got a whole black crew, child, all these things, right? I said, well, this is a new one for us. Like it was new, right? When he comes in, everybody's so quiet and talks, and I have this big loud voice. And I'm thinking, like, okay, Brandi, just be yourself. Like, you read this man's book, you know what's going on, just be yourself. And I show up as myself. A few months later, I'm sitting in a meditation at one of his practitioners' houses here in Atlanta. And she says, oh, Dashi wants to invite you to his birthday in India. I said, his what? Oh, they're doing a whole Bindari. He wants you to come and celebrate. It's going to be so many thousands of people meditating. He wants you to come. And I said, well, why he want me to come? What? She said, he loves your energy. He loves it. He says, Brandi is just who she is. He just loves you just the way you are. He wants you to come and spend his birthday. And so, what do? I get on a flight to go to India, to go all the way around the world, to meditate with 80,000 people for being myself, right? And so, 2014, I was scared about being myself. And I was like, oh my God, do I need to have on my other voice? Do I need to be something different? And a white woman in Whitefish, Montana assured me like it's okay for you to be who you are, right? That was in 2014. But then in 2024, I get reminded by a man who does not look like me, an Indian man who lives over in the south of India, who says, I love you just the way you are. I love all that energy that you bring. You are so, it's just, I just love your energy, right? And I get reminded along the way of how important it is for me to show up in the space as just me, right? Because for me to show up as anybody else, I'm not going to get the same reception. And we know when we show up as these other versions, right? We become sicker, our food don't digest, we are not, all the things that happen when we don't show up as our authentic selves. And I think I don't want to live like that. And so because I've been reassured by people who don't even look like me along the way that who you are is already enough. We need more of that. I just keep showing up with more of that.
Well, first of all, I liked the first example you gave us, the story behind you, taking the train across north part of America, and then the particular city that you chose. I love that you chose Whitefish, Montana, and then
Like it became one of my favorite travel places in the United States. When they said, "What's
yeah.
one of your favorite places in the United States?" I was like, "Whitefish, Montana." Whitefish, Montana. They're like, "What, Brandy? Not Miami, not LA, not
Yeah.
no, not no, Whitefish, Montana." Yeah,
And also love that just those the two examples that you've shared from your experiences, just being your authentic self has really opened a lot of doors
yeah,
for the good. So that's been another just reason for people to just be themselves and not be afraid to do that. But for people who are afraid to go through that mental shift, because you were talking about you've been fearless of taking on new challenges, and there's not everybody's built that same way. So what would you say is something that really makes that mental shift? Because I know about for your show you talk about that you empower people to break from like their fear and like lead with confidence. So what would you say is something that people can do, these challenges, or how to overcome these challenges for growth?
ooh, that's such a great question. Work out, work out. Like I start my day off every morning. I love lifting weights. I'm a former fitness competitor, so I love the sport. I love the sport of bodybuilding. As somebody who competed in my 20s, I lift heavy weights, right? And so every morning at 7 a.m., I am pulling and pushing hard things. And so I start my day off lifting heavy things because by the time 2 o'clock comes and 3 o'clock comes, I've already gotten the hard stuff done. Like I've already pushed my body. I've already had to tell myself 1,000 times, don't quit. I've had to repeat to myself literally the poem, don't quit. Like literally, I repeat that to myself. When things go wrong, as they sometimes will, when the road you're trudging seems all uphill, when the funds are low and the debts are high, you want to smile, but you have to sigh. When care is pressing you down a bit, rest if you must, but don't you quit, right? I am saying that to myself at 7 a.m. in the morning when I'm on a squat rack, or I'm hip thrusting 315, or I'm leg pressing, 645-pound plates on each side, right? I start my day off with hard things because I know that everything that comes afterwards is easy, right? And I always say working out because it's the one thing that you have control over, you and your body. I can't control what my sister is going to do. I can't control what my father is going to do. I can't control what my coworker, what my team, what the AV is going to do when we get on that set. I can't control the microphones. I can't control whether or not people are going to be late or whether they're going to show up on time. But what I do know I have the power and control over is my own personal body, right? And I get to control how good I perform or if I don't perform well. I control that by what goes into my body, how I fuel my body, how I treat my body, and how I optimize and work on my body every single day. And so the first thing I tell people, start a workout regimen. Like start working on yourself. The rest of the stuff is going to fall into place, right? When you start working on yourself, guess what? That confidence goes up. So the confidence that you lacked, you start to see that confidence when you looking in the mirror and you know that that rep is your reward, that you're the sole benefactor of every ounce of sweat that I drop in here. It's all mine, right? When you start to look in that mirror and you start to see that, you say, wait a minute, my confidence is up. I start making some better choices. There's some stuff I'm not going to eat. There's some places I'm not going to go. There's some people I'm not going to be around because you don't match with the frequency of what I'm on right now. So I tell people the first thing they can do is definitely start a workout regimen. You know, get into something where you can lock in every single day and you devote your 1 hour, which is only 4% of your day. 1 hour is 4% of your day. If you're not willing to give yourself 4%, you are not going to be successful in the world.
Wow. I love that. I mean, just the fact that you're able to sort of intertwine a physical fitness to your mindset. But that does make perfect sense. I mean, imagine lifting weights, and then that is true. What else can be heavy for me? I've done
This is
all of that. So
easy.
I love that. That's actually that's a cool stuff. Brandi, I just want to say thank you. I know as we wrap up, just one thing, thank you for being your authentic self. Just our conversation. And again, wow, I was keen to have you on our platform because I just know what you would offer. So as we wrap up, I want to sort of close up with something we call like a fun rapid fire question, just so people can see just some really cool parts of you. So I'm going to ask you a few questions and just give us an answer what first comes to mind. So starting with the first one, what has been the best career advice you've ever received?
Don't quit.
I love
That's
that.
the best one.
I
Yeah,
love
don't quit. And every person I sit with says the same thing. Don't quit.
I love that. I love that. And we can see there's a sort of a mix of like just your childhood, how you grow up. So this question is really cool, and I would love to know your answer to that. If you had one choice, which would you value more, being book smart or being street smart?
Ooh, that's good. Uh, book smart, street smart. Damn, I'm gonna go street smart.
I like
I'm
that.
gonna go street smart.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay, good,
because the
good,
book
good
is
answer.
only when I get out here. I gotta be able to move and groove. I gotta be able to be light on my feet.
I
Okay,
love
so
that.
Application over everything. That's what I'm thinking.
yeah,
I love that. And so the next one, if you could have dinner with one historical figure, who would it be?
Shirley Chisholm. She is dead, but
Wow,
it would have been Shirley Chisholm,
wow,
unbought, unbossed, first woman to go the distance.
yeah,
And without Shirley Chisholm, there is no Kamala Harris.
mm,
There is no place for a Michelle Obama.
yeah,
There is no Jasmine Crockett. There
wow.
was a Shirley Chisholm first. Yeah,
That's
Shirley
why I
Chisholm.
call the catalyst effect. I love that. So,
Yeah.
favorite book or podcast that has influenced your leadership style? You can't mention your dad though. We have to talk about something else.
um, book Discover the Power Within You by Eric Butterworth. It is one of my favorite books of all time. I've read it multiple times. There is a Christ in all of us. There is a Christ in all of us, a purpose that must be fulfilled. There
Mm,
is a divinity, there is a divine spirit in all of us. And so that book is one of my absolute favorites. It was given to me by Dr. Dennis Kimbrough. When I was 26 years old, he told me to read that book, and it was life changing. Discover the Power Within You by Eric Butterworth. And then the podcast that I enjoy listening to is Esther Perel. Where
mm,
should we begin? That is one of my favorites to listen to because it is the if we don't have relationships, we have nothing, right? And
mm.
so she gives you really great tools on how to navigate in intimate relationships, but also like how family dynamics and all the things. So where should we begin is one of my favorite podcasts to listen to outside of Bottom Powers Talks.
I love that, and definitely would add that to my listening list. I really appreciate that. So to close us off, so this question, so we know you do so many different things, author, speaker, serial entrepreneur. What is a fun fact about you that most people do not actually know?
A fun fact about me that people don't know. I be feeling like I'm like an open book in so many ways.
Mm.
Um, my fun does not involve fear, y'all. So like water sports, like anything on the water is probably like uh I mean, I don't like it. I don't know if that's fun or not, but I have tried everything just about once though. So I've been skydiving, I've done it all. I skydive with, you know what? Here's the fun fact that people don't know. I went skydiving with the Golden Knights of the United States Army.
Oh, wow.
There's there's my fun fact. I
Wow.
skydived with the Golden Knights of the United States Army. Fun fact.
That fun fact beats anything I've heard. So, you take the cake with that one. Awesome. Uh,
Yeah.
thank you so much for sharing. I'll pass over to Anirban to close us out.
Yeah. Well, thanks for that mic drop of a way to just get out of the show. So I like to always end the live stream with a recap of what we talked about, just because I like taking these notes just for my own, and then I'm sure people want to get something digestible just to kind of close everything off. So I want to start from the few tips that you shared with us. First thing was never be afraid to reinvent yourself. I love that. Never be fearful or just be fearless to take on something new that will help you grow. Um, you are developing in the dark. So basically, that concept of a photograph being developed in the dark room, those the good old days. And so you applied that to your own life. Just take that time to uh, kind of learn, experience through, so that way you can become your best authentic self.
Yeah.
And the other one was, I like that David and Goliath story reference you mentioned about prepare your battle for your own. Don't use the armor to prepare a battle for someone else. And that's very important for somebody taking on a leadership role and becoming or molding for somebody else, that is, you're just going to be kind of hurdling yourself from becoming the expected leader that you're envisioned to be, rather than you just focusing on your passion and you believe your strengths are, and then you can develop the armor around that. And then the other part of it was also learn how to wield your own weapon. I love that statement right there. Going back to the three C's, which is, let's replace the quiet to calm, right? So we can stick with the theme. Calm, curious, and connected. That really helped to kind of reset, connect, spark the imagination, spark that curiosity, and then connect with and being present with others to really find that relationship and being authentic with others. I love that story about your Millennial Trains project. How you mentioned about just really overall theme of it felt like that you just being authentic in these challenges or these conversations that you don't typically have with, and then it has opened new doors to like new experiences. So that's another plus of being authentic and not being molded to somebody else's um, narrative. And then finally, the last part I love is lift heavy and work out. It's just like stick to a routine, stick to something that really can work to yourself. And it doesn't have to be going back to what you were saying. I know you mentioned earlier. It's like you don't have to have the abs, you don't have to have any of that stuff. It's being clean and being more of having some sort of challenge for yourself that helps develop that mind, that you have some time to develop those three C's, so that way you can be your best self. Because it goes back to what you're saying. If you're not giving yourself that 4%, you're not going to give a percent to yourself for the rest of the day.
Yeah.
So to close us off, that I love the enlightenment you've shared with us, the wisdom that you shared with us. It has been an incredible conversation with your inspiration and insights. So thank you to a huge thank you to Brandi Harvey for sharing this experience with us today. And for everyone who's tuning in to this Leadership Insight series, we want you to encourage you to keep applying these, keep attending these conversations, and apply this to your workplace or your relationship or self-development. So whatever you're doing in life, you want to keep growing, because that will help you become the best version of yourself. So make sure you follow Dapper Dollars on LinkedIn for your future Leadership Insight series and events for your professional development resource. Finally, leadership isn't about titles. It's about the impact you create. Keep striving, keep leading, and keep breaking barriers. See you all at the next live stream.
Thank you.
Hey, that was awesome. Thank you so much. That I really
Thank
enjoyed
you.
all the short stories you shared, the wisdom. It was really good. I felt like it was a very powerful conversation.
You
Thank
tell
you so
amazing
much. I
stories like
appreciate you guys for
that.
having me. I'm glad
Yeah.
to work. Thank you. I'm so glad I